Hello, I'm Maggie Love, and I've got some great memories of Shrewsbury Music Hall, which is now Shrewsbury Museum and Art Gallery, that opened in 2014. The music hall closed 2008-2009, that last pantomime of 2008 was the final pantomime at the old music hall. And I remember that pantomime. I was working backstage with children. Prior to that, there had been a good many pantomimes. When I was a teenager, I was a part of many of those pantomimes, and the building looked very different. So when I was a teenager, I remember the entrance to the music hall being right here. Yep, this window was a doorway, and there was a cafe off to the side, and the box office was at the far end, just at the end of the staircase. However, for me, I hardly ever went in through this entrance because I was fortunate to always be in the shows. So I went through the side entrance, which is now currently the main entrance. And up that side entrance, there was a lift. And in that lift, there was a lovely concertina metal gate that used to rattle, just like thoroughly modern Millie's lift. And as dancers, we all used to go, let's do a time step, let's do a time step, to make the lift go up. It was a lot of fun. And we go right up to the top floor, which is where the dressing rooms were back in the 60s. We're now in the main passage, the shut up through to the museum, but it used to be known as the Firehouse Passage. That's going back to many hundreds of years. Prior to the music hall, there used to be a cafe on one side, which was Sidoli's, and the visitor information on the other side. And it was around about here where that lovely old rickety lift used to be that took me up to the dressing rooms. I remember it being a very dark passage, very noisy, and all the deliveries to the cafe and to the visitor information happened right here in this shut. So this was the delivery area. Having come through the main entrance, I'm now heading to the box office. And right here was the counter for the box office when the music hall was upstairs. Also around the corner was another counter. There was a beautiful archway, and a few people, just two, could fit behind this counter. Now on the main staircase heading up to the music hall. This is one of the greatest features of this building, is this beautiful staircase designed by Edward Haycock, who designed the whole music hall. And it's really fortunate that it was kept, restored, and is in this magnificent condition that you see today. And we can enjoy climbing this staircase, ascending and descending. If you were on your way to come see a show or to listen to some music, you'd head up this staircase. Halfway up to the door right there, you'd be met by the cloakroom, and also St John's Ambulance shared that space. Very often on popular shows, the whole staircase will be filled with people queuing to get up to the landing, especially if the doors hadn't opened yet. As a performer, as a teenager in this building, we'd come down from the dressing rooms and we'd wait on a staircase that was hidden behind doors here. These doors have changed to the contemporary doors and fire doors that we have here now. But there was an old staircase, and we'd wait until all the audience members had gone into the auditorium and the two main auditorium doors had closed. And then we'd come through and we'd head towards the entrance of the stage. Now, some of you might find this hard to understand because there was an entrance onto the stage here. There was a doorway, and on the other side was a set of steps that took you straight up onto the thrust stage. I remember clearly being dressed in green makeup and green glitter and black, and we were all huddled up together because we were playing ghouls in a pantomime. And the idea was that we'd suddenly appear from the floor and scare everybody. It was a lot of fun. We're now in what is now known as the Special Exhibition Room, and the Arts Trail exhibition for the summer of 2025 is here. When I was a teenager, this was the Clive Suite, the bar area. And the main bar was set at this end of the room, and all of the window spaces were open, and there was lots of natural light in here. But as a young person not drinking beer at the time, I remember the stench of beer in this room from the carpet just being saturated in it. All the stars that performed at the music hall would have at some point come into the Clive Suite for a drink. Quite often, after a show, the bar would stay open very late. So for me as a teenager, in the 70s, the early 70s, there was a thrust stage here. You came in from either those double doors or the double doors behind me. And you walked down the side of the stage to the seating, which was all flat floor seating. And then there was a Victorian balcony at the back that seated another couple of hundred or 100 or so people. This thrust stage could play around with putting wings in or increasing the backdrop to give more depth to the performance and stage. And there was a very small hanging lighting rig that went across the audience. Above us, there was a second stage, and that was the original choral landing. That was tiered with steps. You can see those in the sketches of the old music hall when it first opened. For me, I remember pantomime, particularly Cinderella, when we had live ponies in the show to pull Cinderella on her pumpkin coach. And those live ponies were kept in the corridor directly above us, and the grand reveal of the magical pumpkin coach and carriages happened on the upper stage. Now, I also have some great memories of what was a flying ballet, of when we were dressed as beautiful fairies and we could fly across the audience. The person that pulled on our ropes was called our weight, and we used to beg our weight to fly us as high as possible. We'd fly across the audience, and our toes would tap the balcony at the far end to spin us around and bring us back. And as we were coming back, we'd ask to be dropped before the stage so that we could tap the heads of either the first trombonist or the first violinist, because there was a pair of us flying, and then we'd land on the stage safely and be unhooked from our harnesses. Those flying ballet days were tremendous. And I also remember there was a hole in the ceiling right up until the restoration of this gallery. And you used to be able to walk into this building, look up and see the holes in the ceiling that the wires had made on both sides. Of course, in the days when the wire was cutting into the plasterwork, it meant that there were flakes of plaster that would come floating down when we flew across the audience. And the audience thought this was magic because it was like snow falling. So the top floor is now a wonderful gallery space. And we look down upon the Shropshire Gallery of the Shrewsbury Museum. But at some point during the 70s, 80s, the theatre was turned around and the stage was now at the far end of this great hall. The balcony torn down, and that was part of a proscenium flat floor stage. There was bleacher seating placed in that I think took about 250, 300. And the music hall that most people remember from the tail end of the 20th century and going into the 21st century will be that music hall with its red seating, red velvet everywhere, and a flat floor at the far end with a proscenium and very limited wing space. So this is now the education room for the Shrewsbury Museum and Art Gallery. But for me as a teenager, this was our dressing rooms. And each of this space through the education room and into the staff room area was divided up into at least 4 or 5 dressing rooms. We all had a window, we all had the sash window open, and we could look out through the windows and see the audience arriving. There were mirrors in this space, and this is also the great moment where the Beatles would have used one of these dressing rooms. And there is a photograph that shows the Beatles sitting back here with their managers and members of the Deltas, the local band. We're now in Vaughan's mansion in the medieval gallery. This area was a bar for backstage, when the stage had been put to the other end of the main auditorium. So this was like a private bar for artists that were performing. It also served as an extra dressing room when you had large companies, particularly local groups doing shows, and also for the pantomime. This was a really great place to come and relax and keep any extra props, because backstage was very tight. There was very little wing space. It's almost 200 years since Shrewsbury Music Hall opened on this site, and thousands of people have enjoyed the space, both in entertainment and as a performer. Shrewsbury Museum and Art Gallery have enjoyed 10 years so far. Let's hope that the Shrewsbury Museum and Art Gallery continue to give a cultural impact.